Good evening. Welcome to the October 3rd, 2024 Fairfield City School District Board of Education meeting. Our first order is a call to order. Mrs. Gundrum, will you call the roll?
Mr. Begley.
Here.
Ms. Birding Miller.
Present.
Mr. Clark. Mrs. Gundrum, here. Mr. Napier.
Here. Okay, thank you. Our first order is an appointment of our treasurer pro tem. It's worth mentioning that this is our first meeting without Nancy, so we're very sad for that, but wish her all the best in retirement. We have in fact hired a interim treasurer. Her name is Amy Lee, and she will be at many of these meetings, but cannot be here tonight due to prior commitments. So the appointment of treasurer pro tem, Jerry Lynn Gundrum, who will act as treasurer and take the minutes for the meeting. We've done roll call. Let's do the Pledge of Allegiance. Mrs. Gundrum, will you lead us?
Yes. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Point of order, Mr. President, I believe a motion is needed to appoint Ms. Gundrum officially.
Thank you, Mr. Clemens. I'll ask for a motion for that.
I'll make a motion.
Seconded.
Mr. Napier's first. Mrs. Birding Miller is second. Would you please call the roll?
Mr. Napier.
Yes.
Mrs. Birding Miller.
Yes.
Mr. Begley.
Yes.
Mrs. Gundrum. I'll abstain.
Well, it still passes, 3-0. Presentations and resolutions.
Yes, Mr. Begley, members of the board, we do have one presentation this evening. That is in regard to our transportation department. Just to refresh your memory, this presentation is the first of two transportation department presentations that will be given this year. This evening we'll be given an overview of the department. In November, you will hear another presentation that focuses on how the district declares transportation to be impractical. So at this time, I will turn it over to Lance Perry and our Director of Transportation, Mrs. Jeanette Flick.
Hello. Thank you for having me tonight to give the presentation for our transportation update this year. As I go through the slide presentation, I'll just try to briefly touch on most of the items and not spend a lot of time, but I will pause at each slide. So if there is an item you want me to elaborate on or clarify, just let me know. First, our current staff. We currently have 45 drivers, 47 routes. So we are still working diligently to try to fill those last two routes. We have 2 substitute drivers, and our goal is 5 or 6 for that number of drivers. 10 chauffeurs, and chauffeurs are a separate classification. They drive specifically and exclusively special needs routes, special needs students. And then 10 educational assistants. There's 1 aide on each special needs bus. And then 5 office staff. Our work day in our office is 5 a.m. to 5 p.m. Julie McDaniel's our new dispatcher. She's still technically in training, but she is our morning dispatcher. Assigns subs, cover your AM routes, your PM routes, coordinates field trips, and daily driver activities such as extra things when there are evacuations to schedule, alternate days. Alternate days are days when Fairfield is not in session. We still have to transport non-public and parochial schools. So those have to be planned out and passed out. Our transportation coordinator, Amy Scott, she dispatches in the PM. Her main duties are payroll, field trip billing, POs. She also schedules the transportation, contract transportation for homeless and foster students in our district. The safety coordinator and trainer, Angie Kimball, and that's our new position. I think this is going on the 3rd year of having that position in our office. And it's made a real difference in our ability to manage safety concerns better. She is not part of first shift or second shift. She can float and be available where we need her to check out any safety concerns in the district going out and visiting bus stops. She goes to the schools numerous times, mornings, afternoons, really just anything we need, and then also participates in training new drivers and recertifying our current drivers. Our Assistant Director of Transportation, Carla Kingsley, this is her first year. She handles all of the special needs routing, and then she is the supervisor when I'm not there and every afternoon. And just basically, she can back up in all areas, payroll, dispatching, billing, whatever we need. And then me, and I, whatever is needed. Requirements to become a bus driver really haven't changed in the last few years, and those are the basics: 21 years of age, clean driving record. Read through those. Biggest thing about becoming a bus driver is no one realizes the length of time. About the quickest we can get someone from application to driving a bus is 4 to 6 weeks, and that's if everything goes well. Out of 20 applications, we might get one bus driver. And that's due to numerous things, the length of time it takes. Some of the requirements that really hinder it are the pre-service class. A new driver has to go to pre-service class 4 days, and they're typically Monday through Thursday, 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. So if you're working a real job and need to keep working it until you start this one, not everybody can do that. And if you need an evening class, the next evening class is February. So that makes it difficult for some people to do the training and get it done quickly. The other one is the background check. The CDL requirements are strict, and a lot of applicants think because your driving record is the last 2 years for most things, but it's not. When we pull a driving record, it's your entire driving history. So your last 2 years might be good, but if the 4 before that were horrendous, it's not going to work. So those are just some of the things that make it. And then the requirements to remain a bus driver. Once you become a bus driver, you still have to pass random drug alcohol screens, physical each summer, keep your clean driving record, and that means even in your personal vehicle. So, and then there's a recertification every 6 years where you go pretty much through everything you did to become a bus driver. Our bus fleet currently, we have 47 regular education buses and 10 spare buses. And we are currently reducing. We have a lot more buses on the lot, and we are reducing those to save cost. So I believe they're going to be trade-ins, so we're going to get some money for them, and we're not going to have to maintain them, and we're still going to have plenty of buses. So we're doing that right now. 10 special needs buses and 3 spare special needs buses. And we are going to need to increase the special needs buses to 11 next year. That's going to have to happen. Our contracted mechanical services are through Buer's Garage, and our mechanic is Ken Wright. And I can't say enough about Ken Wright. He has a great relationship with the state inspectors, which makes our inspections go way better than everyone around us. He has his maintenance schedule and the maintenance, he keeps our buses so well maintained. They use him as an example. And just the fact that I can depend on him for anything. He was going to come tonight in case you wanted to talk about buses. I mean, you know, bus breaks down on a midnight field trip, he's on it. So he is just right here for me, and I really appreciate him. Yeah. And then our inspections, so the buses always go through spot inspections. Every single bus is fully inspected sometime in September, October, and then again, the annual inspections in December and January. And when they inspect them, It's every little screw, it's detailed. And then they do have random spot inspections also.
I have a question on this slide, if that's okay. The annual inspections, is that during the school year? It says December and January. Is that usually typically when we're on break, or is any of our buses taken out to be inspected, so like they're not being used on that day because they're in for inspection?
So usually it's 4 or 5 different dates during that period, and they'll take like 20 or 15, I guess. And it is during that period. So lots of times, one of the inspection days will be during break, but then the rest are during the school days. They do them between 9:30 and 1:30. So that's between most drivers' routes. But if you have a problem, they're not on the, it becomes a problem because then they can't go back on the road that afternoon. So in that, like I said, knock on wood for Kenny, that doesn't happen very often.
Thank you.
Safety and expectations. So this just goes over mostly board policy. We're lucky we have board policy here. Keeps it simple, follow the board policy when it comes to discipline referrals, et cetera. Biggest referral and probably question by parents and even teachers that don't understand it is the designated place of safety. And a lot of people don't understand that it's a law. It's not something we have in our policy. It's not something that we just made up. It's the law. And each driver is to determine a place of safety at each bus stop, one on the right, one on the left for crossers. And the students are to be instructed and taught to where their place of safety is. In the mornings, they're to be in their place of safety prior to the school bus's approach. And in the afternoons, they're to remain in their place of safety until the bus has left. We teach them until you see the brake lights of the bus. And as you can see, it's 20 steps. Mostly it's 20 steps away. Usually it's a sidewalk. It may be stand next to the tree, but they use a very clearly defined area for them to stand in. And like I said, that's the most misunderstood law, but it's the most required. Referrals, if a student violates, we tell the drivers the first violation, your job is to instruct, teach them what you need them to do. If that doesn't work, try consequences on the bus, move their seat, whatever you need to do that helps fix it. And then ultimately, if they can't get the student to do what they need, you do a referral to the school. And then that's where board policy comes in. The principals deliver consequences based on board policy. Bus stop routing. So a lot of questions on that one. TransFinder is our new program. We just got it this year. And I'm loving it, and it's making it simpler and a little more easier, but we are still learning it, so I feel like it's going to be even better. I guess I'll start with four tiers. So our district's a 4-tier district, and a lot of questions have been asked, why 4 tiers? 4 tiers for us is 47 buses, 57 with your special needs. So we have 4 tiers, 57. Each tier is basically a different time frame. So in our district, you've got a start time and end time for the middle schools. Next tier, second tier, is start time and end time for freshman high, early elementaries, late elementaries. So a single bus driver can run 4 tiers in the morning, 4 tiers in the afternoon. Then you throw in the non-publics, the parochials, who don't always have the same start times as us. So some drivers, you have to fit those in somewhere. So some drivers may have a non-public that when they go do it, they can't do a third, an early elementary or late elementary. Takes them off of 2 regular tiers. So when an example that was given to me earlier was, we're a 4-tier district, 47 buses, 57 with our special needs. Mason is a 2-tier district. They have 120 buses and drivers. So if you think about it, if I take away 1 tier and try to combine it with the others, it requires more buses, more drivers. So that's the main reason for 4 tiers, is it's the most cost efficient yet still safe way to get kids to school.
And if I could just add, that's a really big deal, the tiering system, and I'm glad you shared that example of another district. So people are constantly asking, why do one of our schools have to start, why do our middle schools, right now it's them, years ago it was the high school, why do they have to start so early? If they don't start that early, then that late elementary school is going to start even later. And a lot of the late elementary school families are already dissatisfied with their late start time. So if you bump that first tier back, you're just going to bump everything back. The only way to address that is to hire significant bus drivers and buy a significant number of additional buses, which is not really aligned with us financially with our, with the district at the moment, and honestly hasn't been for quite some time. We've talked, this isn't a new thing, the fiscal responsibility is something that's been ongoing here for quite some time. In a perfect world, we would love to adjust these start times, but it would cost a lot of money to do that. So I didn't want to let that, and I love the example of the other district, two tiers, but 100 and, did you say 10? 120 buses. So that's over double of what we have on the road. And probably that district is pretty similar to the total number of students served.
So,
I think so.
Yeah.
Very close. So total number of students, very similar, more than double buses on the road. So big difference. But I didn't want that to just slip away. I wanted to capture that for the board and for anyone who might be watching at some point. Thank you, Jeanette.
you're welcome. Thank you. Other than that, when it comes to routing, so we're setting the 4 tiers. It simply comes down to our bus stops are already set, and they have been for 10 years. So we don't really change bus stops. They're set in each neighborhood so that students have a stop within the walking distance that we want, which is for elementary, we like to keep it 1/3 to 1/4 mile or less, and high school and or middle school and up, less than a 1/2 mile, but mostly we're 4/10 of a mile or less. There's very few areas that go over 4/10 for even the older students. So we don't really move bus stops year to year unless there's a specific hazard that causes us to. I do try to limit, when we set the bus stops, we try to limit the ones on main roadways. So most bus stops are in a neighborhood so that we're not impeding traffic when we don't have to. I don't put a lot on Pleasant or River or Hamilton Mason unless a student actually lives there and I have to make a house stop. When I'm deciding the routes, I try to base it on a number assuming about an 80% ridership, which is actually higher than we have. But I try to stay to the high side just in case. This year, I tried to average my ridership on 55, assuming that then it would be maybe 47, 48, and that's 2 to a seat. And that's about where we want it. We want to fill it, but we don't want to overcrowd it. And then you have to put consideration, like usually when you're out, it's the afternoons that are hard to make the turnarounds and get back to the schools for pickup. And right now, like that's our tightest. In the afternoon, if you work in the district or one of the schools, 2nd to 3rd tier is so tight that any little delay and we just can't make it. That's it. Any other questions on the routing? And that brings us to our stats for the year. 1 million miles driven, and we're kind of basing that on last year, and then we're pretty similar this year. Right now, we have 8,051 students routed with approximately 6,900 daily riders riding the bus every day. We're servicing 8 private parochial schools this year, and transportation service provided not just school days, but weekends, summer, so there's a lot more days service than just the school days. And we're anticipating around 1,300 field trips based on where we are now and what we had last year. Field trips being any trip that's not a regular to or from school route. So it can be during the day to the zoo, it can be after school to a soccer game, or anything in between. All right, and that concludes it for me. Any questions that I didn't answer?
Questions, comments?
First of all, thank you, Jeanette, for coming and presenting. I just want to also commend your staff for everything they do. I had, this week, I know, or I guess technically last week with the storm, things were very difficult and your staff handled it amazing. I had parents telling me that the app is great and they were informed when their elementary kids were going to be 40 minutes late and that we were able to communicate with parents when buses weren't exactly able to get through roads and we were able to arrange for those. So thank you so much for your staff. Thank you for presenting this, and you guys are doing so great, and I appreciate all the stuff you guys do. And your guys' job is so integral to making sure that our students are safe and we're able to get them here to educate them. So thank you so much for all of your work, and I'm very excited about this app because it seems to be going, the parents seem to be enjoying it very much so.
Yes. I'm glad you brought that up, because yes, the Stop Finder app is new, and I'm getting good reports also, and we're learning to use it better. So it's been a learning curve, but we're getting there.
I'm excited to see where it goes, for
Yes.
sure.
Thank you. Anything else?
I also wanted to thank you for the wonderful presentation. I did have a question about, you said we were serving 8 parochial schools. What's the threshold for, the number of students that, where we would serve them versus doing the payment in lieu of transportation kind of thing?
I don't know that there's an exact number, and that's something, our next presentation is going to be more into that. That's something we're really looking into, where it becomes practical or not practical. So, yeah. A lot of times, the buses that we have will get 45 students requesting transportation, so you think, well, that makes sense. And then in reality, you might have 15 riding the bus. So we're really looking at numbers this year, doing counts, paying a little more attention, and then going to talk about it more this year.
Okay.
I can speak to that as well. Doug Palmer, who is our Columbus representative that we speak to quite a bit, actually. In fact, he just helped me with the properly writing the spec for our buses that we're going out to bid actually next week on, which we're very excited about. When discussing with him, there is no number that is a set number from the state. But a guideline that he used, he says when you look at it, the guideline he used was around 20. So he said if it's below 20 riders consistently, you might want to look at that one. But that was kind of like a guideline that he communicated, that when we have discussions, that would be a very loose number that we would look at.
Okay, thank you. I mean, I'm always in awe, whenever we're talking about bus routes, that you're able to coordinate everything and map all this out and figure out, who has to go where and when and whatnot. So it's amazing to me, and I thank you for everything.
Thank you. It's a great plan, but I give it to the drivers, because you know how plans go, and those guys get it done no matter what happens. Like you said, that day, they just kick it in and get those kids home. So they're great.
Yeah, I want to thank you both for what you do. It's great that you guys work great together, hand in hand. I have a question on the parochial schools. Do they pay us to use our busing, or is that something that we just supply?
No, that's being a resident, that's part of their service that they receive for being taxpayers of Fairfax
Okay,
City
well, we
Schools.
only go so far though, right?
That's correct. 30-minute drive time in a bus from their school of attendance.
Okay.
Yep.
Now, you guys are doing a great job. Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Just some quick highlights, 5 a.m. to 5 p.m.
That's our office hours.
Amazing. 1 million miles a year?
That was based on last year's,
Yeah.
when we crunched them last year, and we're pretty much right on track this year.
That's incredible as well. I understand the software, you've mentioned it, it's
Yes.
going to create or has created some efficiencies for us.
Yes.
That's great to
Yes,
hear.
and we jumped into it quickly, but the more we learn, the better it gets. So I'm really thinking we made a good choice.
Yeah, that is great to hear. And 4 tiers, right? We've all talked about that, and I know it's a tight schedule, and that's tough. But you do an amazing job. 1,300 field trips, that's athletic endeavors, and all of those things. So, this is, the bus driver's day can go long beyond 5 a.m. to 5 p.m., can't it?
Yes, some of the drivers are there late nights through the week and on a Saturday, maybe all day. So, yes.
Well, you assure them that the board is very appreciative of their efforts.
I will.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I would just like to add, I know that earlier this year when Jeanette was here, I pointed out off camera, one of my favorite stories, but I'd like to say it on camera now so that everyone knows, Jeanette, that the first day of school, she came in for her shift, did not go home, spent the night at the office, and stayed the next day till 2 o'clock. And I can't remember what she and I were communicating about, but we were texting back and forth, and I didn't know it at the beginning that she had pulled an all-nighter. And then I found that out about, halfway through the conversation, and I said, Jeanette, you need to go home. And she's like, I'm hoping that I'm asleep by the time this message goes through. I'm like, well, I don't think it'll be that fast. But in addition to that all-nighter, it's very common for, I know, Jeanette to come back to the office in the evenings, just works so hard. Kudos to her and her department. Tonight, you just captured a small piece, one of the most complex positions in the district. You talk about weekends, but let's talk about rain and snow and ice and overnight sometimes, and coming back at 2 a.m. from show choir events, and again, getting weather that's not expected on your way home. Just the entire department, like she said, they get it done under her leadership. And I know she mentioned Kenny Wright from yours. 100% correct. Kenny is always there for us. Talked to him on many occasions. I'll be right there. That's what he is. That's what he does. And he is. He's always there. So just kudos all the way around. Very difficult job, but is done well. Puts Jeanette and her crew, they put kids first, and very much appreciated.
Thank you, Jeanette. With that, we'll move on to superintendent's recommendations and reports.
Yes, at this time, Mr. Hustle will be covering the items listed under Personnel Professional and Personnel Support.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Mr. Bagley, members of the board, I have several items for your consideration this evening. Under Personnel Professional, number 1, unpaid leave of absence, letter A. Number 2, employment, letters A through B. That concludes all the items I have for your consideration under Personnel Professional.
Thank you, Mr. Hustle. I'll entertain a motion to accept these recommendations.
So moved.
Second.
Mrs. Birding Miller and Mr. Napier. Mrs. Gundram, please call the roll.
Mrs. Birding Miller,
Yes.
Mr. Napier,
Yes.
Mr. Begley,
Yes.
Mr. Clark, Mrs. Gundram, yes.
Mr. Bagley, members of the board, I have several items for your consideration this evening under Personnel Support. Number 1, resignations, letters A through B. Number 2, unpaid leave of absence, letters A through E. Number 3, employment, letters A through F. That concludes all the items I have for your consideration under Personnel Support.
Thank you again, Mr. Hustle. I'll entertain a motion to accept these recommendations.
Make a motion.
Second.
Mr. Napier, Mrs. Birding Miller, Mrs. Gundram, call the roll.
Mr. Napier,
Yes.
Mrs. Birding Miller,
Yes.
Mr. Begley,
Yes.
Mr. Clark, Mrs. Gundram, yes.